Here is how I create 100 pieces of content every single week, and I do it without burning out. So I want to share with you some of my strategies, what I do, what I don't do. One of the brands is my personal brand in Spanish, and the other one is my personal brand in English, in which I teach you all how to get remote jobs and monetize online. This one you're seeing here. So two very different types of contents, and I do it all on like 5 different platforms. So I'm going to break everything down for you so that you know what to do, what not to do, how to save time, my workflows, and I do it all with the help of one of my favorite tools, Adobe Express, which is the sponsor of this video. So let's get to it. Now, I always say that the secret to doing all of this is not constantly creating new things all the time, but having some good ideas, testing them out in different platforms, and then making the good ideas into content in different formats, okay? So I create content for YouTube on both channels, both brands. I create content on 2 different Instagram accounts, 2 different TikTok accounts, 1 Threads account. I also do newsletters, and I do Substack. So as you can see, some is like short form video, some is short form text, some is longer form text, some is short form text. So a little bit of everything. By the way, I am Andrea Valeria, and I've been creating content since 2012 at this point. So I really enjoy creating content. That's also one of my secrets, that I don't really want to delegate a lot of the content creation. I like to do it myself because I enjoy it. So if you do not enjoy it, I would recommend delegating. But if you do sort of like creating content on social media, then I'm going to break down all the different ways in which you can do it without burning out, and how you can save time, and how you can steal some of my strategies to create as much content as I do every week. So let me show you what these 100 pieces of content actually look like per brand, okay? Let's start with this one, which is like the educational informational brand. I do 7 TikToks per week, and some of those get reposted to Instagram Reels, about 3 usually. But aside from that, I also create 1 original Instagram carousel per week, and like 7 very short IG trials per week, at least, sometimes more than that. Then I also create 2 YouTube videos per week, kind of like this one that you're watching right now, but some of them have even less editing than this one, so I don't spend as much time on the editing for these. Then I write 28 threads per week, and those usually get reposted also to my Substack notes. And then I write 1 long form Substack article per week, and 1 newsletter per week as well. And then for my entertainment brand, it's a little bit different. I also do 7 TikToks per week at least, and all of those get reposted to my Instagram. Sometimes I also do like trial reels. I usually create about 1 carousel per week for the entertainment brand, and also 2 YouTube videos per week, and those are usually with like 0 editing, so they're faster to create, and those are even longer than the ones I post on here. They're usually like 45 minutes, more like conversational talking head podcast style. For both of my brands, sometimes I also clip videos from the longer form YouTube videos to use for TikTok and Reels. But what I want you to understand is that 100 published pieces don't necessarily mean original ideas. They're not all original. They are repurposed for each different format, okay? So a large part of my output is actually repurposed content, and I'll show you exactly how I repurpose everything. So here's my first content creation system. I do not create separate content for every single platform. I would go crazy if I did that. For my informational educational brand, I create 7 TikToks, and then about 3 of those get also posted to Instagram. And for my entertainment brand, I create 7 TikToks, which are usually more like vlog style, and all of those get posted to Instagram because that makes sense for me over there. The important thing is that I don't double my workload just because I am on 2 platforms, and this is one way in which you can work basically smarter, not harder, and have as much content and presence on different platforms as possible. And for those of you who think that this might be repetitive for the audience, people don't follow you everywhere. So they are not necessarily seeing everything you post. So it's fine to cross-post. My content creation system number 2 is I use Adobe Express for my covers on Instagram Reels. They all look the same and cohesive because I use the apply branch feature, or I have templates, and I'm always using my font and my colors that I have for my brand specifically. On Adobe Express, you can have different brands, and on there you can have your fonts, every graphic that you use, maybe any logos, the colors. That way, whenever you're creating content for that specific brand, you just have to apply brand and it'll always look cohesive. My content creation system number 3 is one of my favorite ones, okay? Because sometimes you have to test content to see if it's landing, and that's what I do specifically on Threads. Threads, as you know, is kind of like Twitter or X, in which you write short form text. It could be a paragraph or even a sentence. So I do a lot of that on there. Whenever a post on Threads takes off or it does well, I know that that is something that my audience cared about. So I usually turn that into something else. It could be into the hook of a video for my TikTok or my Reels. Because if the idea performed well one time on one platform, that same idea can also perform well on the other one. And it doesn't mean that I'm going to use the image and just repost it just like that. No, we are not necessarily like posting the same thing on every platform. We adjust it to different formats. So I take the idea and I make it into a video, for example. And here's my content creation system number 4. What happens when something performs really well on TikTok, for example? That means that people are interested in knowing more about that topic. So if my talking head or yapping video worked for TikTok, it can also work for YouTube. That does not mean I'm going to post the same video on YouTube. That means that I'm going to expand and make a longer video for my YouTube in horizontal format. And I'm going to talk about that same thing, but I'm going to elaborate and give people more information because I already tested the idea and people wanted to know more about it. So YouTube is the perfect place to talk more in depth about certain topics. Now, when talking about YouTube, one of the most important parts of a YouTube video is the packaging. The packaging is basically the thumbnail and the title, okay? So whenever someone sees that, they want to click if you have good packaging. So I use Adobe Express for ChatGPT to create my thumbnails for YouTube. So my thumbnail strategy, to tell you a little bit more about it, is that my title tells the story, and then the thumbnail, the text on there, is going to spark a little bit of curiosity or give people extra information. I don't repeat the same information that's on the title of my YouTube video, okay? So they complement each other so that people would want to click. Now, here's my content creation system number 5. I really think this is important, especially if you are creating a lot of videos. You don't want to get ready and set up and like do your hair every single time you are going to make videos, because then that's a lot of friction there. So you reduce the friction by batching. Batching means that when I sit down to create a YouTube video, I usually create 2. So I create one for my entertainment brand and one for my It's a Travel OD brand right here. And that way I maximize the time and the energy and just like the space in which I sit down to create, and I just do 2 at once. Sometimes I also, once I'm here, I turn the phone around in vertical mode and I also create some TikToks. So that is how you batch videos to be a little bit more efficient and save time. Here's my content creation system number 6. Okay, let's say that there's a video that I create on YouTube that there were a lot of comments on, or I see people are interested, or it's getting traction. That is a good sign that I could elaborate on that topic even more, okay? So see how I had the idea on Threads and I elaborated on a video on TikTok, and then I elaborate even more on YouTube. I can elaborate even more. Same exact topic on an article for Substack, okay? I don't just take the transcript and paste it on there. No, I create a whole different article with more information and I go more in depth. I show screenshots so that people that wanted to know even more about a topic that I shared about on YouTube have the option to go deeper. And that would be on my Substack articles. As you know, Substack is long form text articles, but I like to add photos or images in between my articles to just like break it down visually. So I have a lot of like photo shoots that I did back in the day in which I did not have bangs. So I don't like to use those because I feel like people would know it's an old photo. So here's how I use Adobe Express to literally update the photos. Adobe Express has a feature in which you can like add objects to an image. So I use that to add bangs to my older photos, and I take them from this to this right here. So it works. Now let me talk to you about my content creation system number 7. Once I have my Substack article, what else could I possibly make that into? Well, I take that Substack article and I like summarize it. I take the most important information from it and I turn it into an Instagram carousel. So the text of my Instagram carousel usually comes from Substack articles. And at the end of my Instagram carousels, I usually have a CTA or a call to action in which I tell people that to learn more or read more about this topic, they can go to my Substack article. So see, everything is a loop. For my Instagram carousels, I use Adobe Express and I have different templates that I already have. And I just swap the content, the photos, and I add the different text. And I use the apply brand to keep everything visually consistent. So I create or update supporting images when needed. But the important thing is that I avoid redesigning every single carousel from scratch every week because I use templates. These are the systems I'm talking about that make my life easier and my workflow a lot faster. Here's my content creation system number 8. For my entertainment brand, I also create carousels, but the carousels on there don't have a lot of text. They're just images. But sometimes a regular photo dump is a little bit basic in my opinion, so I like to add text, but not just like any kind of text. I literally draw my own text and I use on Adobe Express the tool that's called Draw Shape. The style of my carousels on there are fun and colorful. So with the Draw Shape tool, this is what I do right here. I literally draw the text myself. I use different colors. I make them really colorful. Then I export that as a PNG with a transparent background and I add it to my photos on Instagram as an overlay. So I create carousels for both of my brands. Of course, they are very different because they're different kinds of brands, but I use Adobe Express for both. Now here's my content creation system number 9. YouTube also becomes short form again. So remember what I said about there's a whole loop? Well, we keep on looping the workflow because there is a feature on Adobe Express called Clip Maker in which you can upload a long form video and it can know what are like the most important parts of your video and it makes it into shorter form video that you can use for Reels or YouTube Shorts or TikToks. So you just upload the long video and it'll give you like 8 different short form videos. You can pick which ones you like and keep. And then it also gives you the captions. So that's all ready for you to upload to a short form platform. Here's my content creation system number 10. Let's talk about the Instagram trial reels. They are such a good way to get discovered and grow your Instagram accounts nowadays, okay? So I always think that the reels that I post on my feed and the carousels are ideal to feed the people who already follow me and know me, but the trial reels are perfect for people who don't know you so that they can discover your account. So for trial reels, I usually do at least 2 per day per account. But these are easier to make because these are like 7-second videos that look like this. And I just create them directly on the Instagram platform most of the time. Like I said, these are easy to make. I don't have to shoot anything new. I just use a lot of my B-roll that's hanging around on my phone. And I add text, I add music, and up it goes. Remember that when you create content, not everything has to be a big production. This is one of those low production cases in which you can just try different things and they're not even on your feed. So if it doesn't work and it doesn't look super cute and pretty, it doesn't matter. Here's my content creation system number 11, the newsletter that I send out every week. I send it out with legit remote jobs. So this is something that I have to research and sit down to do every single week. But in terms of the content or the text, aside from the remote jobs I share with my audience, it's just information that performed well on a YouTube video or on a Substack article. I summarize it, and that is the information that goes on the newsletter. So again, whatever performs well on one platform, you can use for your other content. So there you have it. That is my entire content loop. See how I'm not creating new content for every single piece? I am not sitting down every time I'm going to create a piece of content and I'm going like, oh, so what do I make now? What are we talking about today? No, I am looking at my content that already exists, that's already posted. So we're taking all the winning ideas from the different platforms and turning them into different kinds of formats for new platforms. Does that make sense? So it's very important for you to know that I post about 100 times per week on different platforms, but I don't create 100 pieces of content, the ideas themselves from scratch for each one. I also understand that not everything needs to be a high production. I also use what I already have sitting on my camera roll to create shorter form videos for both quick TikToks or for trial reels for more discovery. And very important, which is something that I see sometimes people doing, is that they force a single piece of content into every single platform. But it's important to understand that different platforms like different formats, and you should respect what type of format each platform is asking for. I also don't repurpose everything. If it didn't perform well, you don't need to keep telling people about it in different formats. If it didn't perform well the first time, it might be an indication that you either have to restructure the idea or that people are just not interested in that topic. And that's okay. People are not always going to be interested in everything you share. You just share it differently or share a different topic. Now, this is very important. I am sharing with you how I do it all without burning out and how I use different tricks to save time. But more than 100 pieces of content per week, it's a lot of work. I am not going to sugarcoat it. But number one, I love doing what I do. Number two, I've been doing it for a long time. And number three, I've created systems and a workflow that makes it all easier. If you are starting out, doing all of this might be a bit overwhelming. So I don't necessarily recommend doing everything, but you can definitely steal some of the ideas that I shared here to maybe start creating 20 pieces of content per week and then go up to 30, then try a different platform. So I didn't start with all the different platforms I have now. Once I was comfortable with doing Instagram, then I started doing TikTok. Then I started with Threads. Then I started with YouTube, and then the last one I added to my workflow was Substack. So it's perfectly fine to go slow, and you don't have to be everywhere. Pick one platform if you are new, and then you can add the new ones later. If you're a content creator, let me know how many pieces of content you create every week. And if it's your goal to increase your output, I hope that this video taught you a few things and gave you a few ideas of how you could create more content with the content that you already have created, if that makes sense. I am Andrea Valeria. I love to monetize on social media and teach people how to get remote jobs. And that is what I'm sharing about here on my YouTube channel. If you haven't given Adobe Express a try, you just saw all the many different ways in which I use it, and I didn't even mention all of them. The opportunities and the tools are endless, so you should go try it yourself. I'll see you next time. Ciao.